victims remain hospitalized, 4 in critical condition, following the deadliest terror attack in New York City since 9/11. 8 killed and a dozen injured by a jihadi who mowed them down with a truck and then shouted, Allahu Akbar. We have more information today about the suspect, his motive, and how he came to America. The immigrant from Uzbekistan was allowed into the country in 2010 on a diversity visa. President Trump now vowing to end the lottery program.
I am today starting the process of terminating the diversity lottery program. Diversity lottery sounds nice. It's not nice. It's not good. So we want to immediately work with Congress on the diversity lottery program, on terminating it, getting rid of it. We want a merit-based program where people come into our country based on merit.
More now from Catherine Herridge, our chief intelligence correspondent in Washington. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Dan. This afternoon, Homeland Security officials confirmed to Fox News that the suspect was admitted under a valid visa for the program in March of 2010, and that the program does require an interview with the State Department and additional screening. As you just mentioned, President Trump said he is in the process of terminating the program because he favors a merit-based approach, not a program like the lottery that traditionally tilts in favor of countries with historically low rates of immigration. We learned today the suspect was among the maximum 50,000 people allowed into the U.S. every year under the State Department program, and about 24,000 people have entered the U.S. from the country of Uzbekistan since 2005, and that's where the suspect was born. Also today, 2 sources telling Fox News that the suspect had connections to individuals who were already known to law enforcement. At that New York City briefing earlier today, the Deputy Commissioner for Counterterrorism explained the suspect was running with a very suspicious crowd. Meantime, new photos obtained by Fox News give you a better sense of New Jersey's Omar Mosque and the focus of multiple leads after 9/11. The suspect's brick apartment building is virtually on its doorstep. You see it right there with the mosque, the white building in the distance. A former federal investigator with Pent Bomb, that's the code name for the 9/11 file, said the area is about 4 to 5 blocks from 9/11 hijacker and ringleader Mohammed Atta's apartment, as well as where the Mosul hijackers were located, and they finalized the 2001 plot. So this area remains really very much a nest, as it was described to us, or an enclave for radical teachings. Dana.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much. The president has directed Homeland Security to ramp up extreme vetting of foreigners in the wake of the attack.
We have to get much tougher. We have to get much smarter. And we have to get much less politically correct. We're so politically correct that we're afraid to do anything. And that's not only our country, that's other countries too that are having very similar problems. And we have to get tough, we have to get smart, we have to do what's right to protect our citizens.
Greg, it's interesting that he brings that up today because Pew Research poll had a poll out today that said 71% of Americans are concerned about how politically correct America has become.
Well, you know, we talk about political opportunism, but the real political opportunism after terrorism is the application of Islamophobia. If anybody expresses concern over radical Islam, you get in trouble. And there's this conflict now where you have the mayor and you have the governor saying there are 8 million people in New York City. There's a million pair of eyes. If you see something, say something. But you can't say something in this current climate because you will lose your job. If this guy was already on our radar, he was interviewed by the feds in 2015 because he had links online to certain kinds of bad groups. But why didn't they go after him? Maybe they were scared that they were going to lose their job. They're going to lose their job. And this is how everybody feels. I'm tired of this hypocrisy where they say, if you see something, say something, because they really don't want you to do anything. Right. Because the moment you do something, you are labeled Islamophobic. You're labeled a bigot. So if you look at what Trump does, the media does this. The leaders do it about Islamophobia. He doesn't. He's the closest to the ground of any president I've ever seen talking about the actual sincere fears of the average citizen. There are things that I know I'm not going to like his tax plan. I don't understand his 401k stuff. It's going to drive me crazy. But his response, and this is the most important thing, his response to the presence of terror is so much more important to the reaction after terror. When you see Cuomo and you see Mayor de Blasio and everybody else saying how strong New York is and how we're gonna have that parade, who cares? It's about your response before the attack, your willingness to admit that there is the presence of terror before terror strikes. It's no good afterwards to give sympathy after it's happened. It doesn't matter. What matters is having the guts to say, it's here. How do we get rid of it? And then you get targeted for Islamophobia. So it takes guts to say what he is saying. To talk about the diversity visa is important. Diversity untethered to merit is of no value.
And remember, it was just a few years ago that I think it was the Associated Press went after the NYPD for monitoring these mosques, including that one that Catherine Herridge was just pointing out.
Best example, Nidal Hassan. They knew about him.
Yep.
Nobody said anything at Fort Hood.
President Trump also today, Juan, pointed out immediately early this morning that Chuck Schumer, the senator from New York, had supported diversity visas. He didn't point out that Chuck Schumer had also voted to change that program, even though that bill didn't get to the president's desk under President Obama. Listen to some of the Democrats responding to Trump.
Look, the last thing the president or anyone else should do is politicize this tragedy.
I don't think this is the time to get political. There's no doubt that we have to be smarter and have more intelligence. But there's also no doubt that this is not the time to play politics. This is not the time to foment hate.
All President Trump does is take advantage, horrible advantage, of a tragedy and try to politicize and divide. The American people long for leadership, not divisiveness, not finger-pointing, not name-calling. This is a tragedy.
Your thoughts, Juan?
Well, I don't think there's any question from Chuck Schumer's point of view. This is a tragedy. This is his home state. This is New York City. I think where I would differ from Greg is I think that when you say, let's go forward with the Halloween parade, let's continue to live our lives, or in the language of President Bush, let's not let the terrorists win through intimidation. I think that's a very important message. Now, when you're talking about something like prevention, I don't think there's any question that our country has taken logical steps to what we call hardened targets, to make it more difficult to go through the airport, to get a visa. President Trump's talking about extreme vetting. It takes 2 years if you're a Syrian refugee. We have extreme measures ready in place. I want to know what he's going to do to make it more extreme.
But
that
I'm
would
talking
be
about
news
saying
to me.
something. I think there's
No,
some hypocrisy.
that's fine, but
You're telling citizens to say something and then you punish them.
I don't think so at all. In fact, I think the contrary is the case. I think you have people, including me, who said something.
That's what I'm saying.
But guess what? When you say something these days, I think there are lots of people like Greg who would say, "Thank God somebody stood up and said something."
I don't.
And I think the police, by the way, are very appreciative of informants, and they have many informants in these very mosques that they have been surveilling. That's another example of the fact that it's not like we're a bunch of oafs who've never taken any steps to protect ourselves. We have people who are surveilling the mosque, and then the question becomes a much more difficult question for you as a libertarian about privacy and rights of private worship.
There's no problem there.
I have no problem.
Well, but I'm saying, for the American Constitution,
security
there's a problem.
Freedom.
It is true that when people say something to authorities, they are automatically presumed to be Islamophobic. We're not even allowed to talk about what Catherine Herridge discussed as a nest of jihadists, because that would be going after a Muslim American community of immigrants, and therefore you are bigoted and don't want more people to come into the country. The left is making two different arguments here. The first is that you have to choose between proper vetting, more vetting of people, foreigners coming into the country, or nothing at all because you would be bigoted to do so and you're going after minorities as a result. The second thing they're saying is, well, it's on the American people and the country to be more welcoming to particularly Islamic immigrants who come to this country, because if you aren't, then they're not going to assimilate, and therefore they may go into terror and turn to terror, as if that is a justification for something like this happening. We don't owe them anything. They owe America a lot.
Jason, before I go to you, just a note that the U.S. Attorney of New York is going to hold a press conference later this hour. They will be announcing terrorism charges against the suspect. So we'll bring that to you live. It will be later in this hour, so don't miss that. Jason, your thoughts?
I think Greg is absolutely right. What does it mean to actually be on a watch list? Because nobody's really actually watching them. If you think that they're actually watching them, what they're doing, where they're surfing the internet, they're not doing anything.
Well, it does
they're
take
on a
something
list.
like 14 NYPD or intelligence officials per one guy that they're watching. So we have a resource problem, possibly.
Well, but Homeland Security funding has actually gone up, despite what Senator
Chuck
Schumer
said.
Was
but that number was just cut in the budget that the Republicans just passed.
Absolutely wrong, because what happened was the appropriations went up. They actually went from $47.8 billion to $49.3 billion, and the appropriation for 2018 is $51.1 billion.
Is that enough?
He wordsmithed it. He tried to say, well, the proposed budget, but what was actually appropriated went up. So he knows what he's doing.
So he won.
No, he was getting his word out there, but he didn't have much policy to stand on. The thing that bothers me is if you go back to the Boston bombing, and this is part of what Greg's point is, we didn't do anything. Now, I introduced a bill to actually do some things with asylum seekers who violate this and actually go back to their country of origin, back and forth. This country still today does not have an entry-exit program. I can go down and buy a sandwich at my Gandolfo's place and get a turkey sandwich, and the 10th time I do it, I get a free one because they know if I've come and gone to their shop. If you go and leave this country and come back, we don't know. This person today, I promise you, nobody can definitively tell you if he actually left the country.
Yeah, but here's the thing.
That's current law.
But here's the thing. This guy came here, and he was vetted as part of the program, and apparently no alarm bells went off, right? So
no, they did, though. They did all over the place.
Not at all. And so here's the thing. He was led to this horrible act by something that happened while he was in the United States. And this is what we really need to talk about.
But he was on a
and where was he hanging out in the United States?
He was on the watch list because of association with those other folks.
Now, where was he hanging out? In a mosque that was preaching radical ideology. That's where he was hanging out.
My point to you is, I think that this took place online. The conversion to radical Islam took place online. And unless we get away from what I think is a distraction and one that's, I think, politically advantageous to President Trump to talk about, oh, we need to vet more, we need to stop. None of the people on his Muslim ban list, none of them, including this event, would have been stopped by his Muslim ban.
But the point, you said that there weren't any red flags at all. There
Not
absolutely
when he was
were.
vetted.
The mosque that he went to.
That's after he came into the country.
You said there was not. You think that this all happened online, which he was radicalized.
I'm saying most of this whole thing about trucks. Look at Nice, right? Look at what happened in Times Square 5 months ago. They're using vehicles as weapons of destruction.
But you specifically said when he came here, something happened. He was living in America to make him do this. Yeah. So if you look at everything around him, the people he was hanging out with, which, by the way, he has friends, one of which the FBI believes is a terrorist who is missing now in the United States. He was going to a mosque that was under FBI surveillance. And this was happening online, which they clearly did not catch. He did the exact playbook
as
the
NYPD here because
says.
We do have additional information. The FBI now is saying that they are seeking information on a second person they believe was involved in this attack.
And, okay, that flies in the face. We keep talking about online recruitment, which is true. But we also have to admit the fact that they have friends and that they have relatives. And we've had two examples. The Boston bombing were brothers. And in San Bernardino, it was a husband and wife. So we have to understand that this is a family thing. It's a tribal thing. It's one person. It's an ideology. So it infects a lot of different people. My last point is, it is a coincidence that this happened on Halloween. But there's a metaphor there that has been used before, that when your kids come home with a bag of candy, the parents vet it. They go through it. They make sure nothing bad's in there because they took something outside and they brought it inside. And the parents go through it and they look through it. And that's not absurd. To do that is not absurd. It's what a parent does. Applying that logic right now in a changing world, when the outside is coming in with a pernicious ideology, the razor blade in the apple is radical Islam. You have every right to vet.
But why do you think we don't do it?
I'm going to have to get in one more thing because they keep telling me some more information. So remember that within this hour, the U.S. attorney will have a press conference. They will announce charges against the suspect. Sources are saying that the suspect does not show remorse for the attack. that he is being cooperative. So that possibly could be the reason the FBI is seeking information about a second person. So we're going to have all of that for you in this hour. He may have acted alone, but all indications are the New York City terror suspect was inspired by ISIS. So how do we fight this new front in the war on terror? We'll be right back.